Hey everybody, welcome back to Dog Focus Training. Today we're going to talk about 3 misconceptions people have about e-collars, and we're going to kind of debunk those and hopefully make you feel a little bit more comfortable about using one of these, perhaps one of the most important training tools that we have. Talking about new e-collars, or talking about e-collars in general, Sport Dog has a brand new e-collar that has just come out. I'm super excited. I saw it in an ad today. I'm going to run over and pick one up today, and then I'm going to do a full review later on. There's a lot of reasons why I'm excited about this e-collar. The biggest reason is because it has an LED readout, which will make it easier to read if it's dawn, if it's dusk, if it's, no matter what it is. You don't have to kind of worry about the dial. I don't have to worry about the numbers on my dial getting worn off, so I'm not sure where it is. This is it's gonna be a game changer. So I'm gonna pick one up today and go through. I'm going to use it for the next little bit, and then I'm going to do a full review in an upcoming video, so make sure you check that out. If you haven't already, please hit the subscribe button, and make sure that you have the little notifications bell set up to let you know every time we put out a new video. All right, let's talk about myths and e-collars. Okay, so first you'll notice that I'm starting to do videos in my trailer now, in our RV. We've got, our family has moved, and we're kind of transitioning. We're staying with other family members, and so I spend a lot of time out here while we build a house, something more permanent for our family. So you're going to be seeing me out here a lot. The first misconception that we want to talk about is that an e-collar is a punishment, that it's a correction. This is something you do when the dog misbehaves, and so it's a negative reinforcement. There's no question that e-collars have been used that way, shock collars as they've been called in the past, and they absolutely have been used that way, and they're going to continue to be used that way, because one of the things that we'll talk about throughout this video is that bad trainers with e-collars will use any instrument, any training device they have in a negative way. And it's not that the instrument is bad, it's that the person using it either A, doesn't know how to use it, or B, is in such a mindset or has such an approach to training dogs that it doesn't matter what he has in his hands. If it's a leash, if it's a heel stick, or even just a rolled up newspaper. Any device for a trainer like that is going to become punitive. So instead, so the question is, well, if it's not punitive, then what is it? The e-collar is way more of it's a communication device. It's a way for me to communicate to my dog and to get his attention back on me when there is this world of distractions. Every time your phone goes on vibrate, I don't know, or does that little ting noise, or that whatever sound or notification you've got set up for a text message. When that ting goes off, what do? You pick up your phone to see what it says, right? Like, you've just been communicated by that little noise. And if it's vibration, you've got it sitting in your back of your pocket. That vibration goes on, that stimulation happens, and that's a signal to you that there's a message coming in. And that's kind of how I like to kind of explain or describe e-collars to people who are concerned about, if it's a punishment or punitive in any way. And the way I like to teach people how to use e-collars is just that it's a communication. I send a stimulation, it goes to the dog, and the dog knows I'm about to tell him something. If you want to see another positive reinforcement, there's also a way that you can use the tone. I like to use the tone as a positive reinforcement. You can check out my video on using tone on an e-collar as positive reinforcement, as well as 5 other tips for using e-collars effectively and humanely. You can check that out in the video right up here. If I've trained the device correctly, then what's going to happen is, just like a person who's been, and this happens all the time. In fact, in one of my classes, I did a study with a young woman. This was years ago, back when we still had flip phones, And when the first Razor was still really, really kind of the cool thing, I had a student that just was constantly texting on this phone. Back when you had to push buttons and know the, A, B, C, D, E, that back in the old days. And she would have it on vibrate. So we did a social experiment with her one day in class, and we took her phone and we stuck it on the desk. And every time that vibrated, I watched a physical response in her. She had been, she had created this habit where she wanted, every time that thing buzzed, she would reach out and grab it. It was an automated response that she had created over her time with that phone. If we train our dogs right with these e-collars, when we send a stimulation, when a dog gets distracted and we need their attention, that stimulation can be a lot like that vibrate on the phone. And as soon as that dog feels it, he's going to look to you. He's going to turn around and be like, "Oh, where are you? What do you want me to do? What's the incoming message that I'm getting?" And so, myth number one, this is not a punitive or a corrective tool. It's a communication tool. It's like a text message for your dog. All right, so number two, the second misconception or myth that we want to bust today is the idea that the shock collar hurts dogs, that the e-collar, the stim collar, people call them all different things all over the world. Shock collar is probably, that's the one I grew up with. It's probably, for anybody that's older in the dog world, that's probably what they're familiar with. The term today is e-collar, and a lot of that is fine-tuning what the collar does. There is this idea of electrocuting a dog. That's one of the misconceptions that comes from what we used to call them, is this idea that like I've got them hooked up to a battery and I'm shocking or electrocuting them. That's not how this works. This is, I think maybe the very best way to describe this, if you've ever been to a physical therapist and you're trying to rehab an injured muscle or ligament or joint, one of my favorite parts of those, I have to go every once in a while to a chiropractor, and he tweaks my back. And so shout out to my chiropractor, who does an amazing job. Or at least he did before, my chiropractor before we moved. Anyway, sorry, I got derailed. But when I go there, when I finish getting adjusted, one of my favorite things is the TENS unit. And I'll go lay down on a big massage table, and he'll take these electric pads, these TENS pad, and he'll hook those up to my back. And there are these electric stimulations that fire the muscles and cause those muscles to contract and relax and contract and relax. But it happens in such a low level that it's actually therapeutic. Now, when it comes to the dogs, the levels I've used, I've put my dog collar, my dog's e-collar, I've put it on my arm. I feel like my wrist is one of the, it's a pretty sensitive place. I've got a lot of nerves running through there. So I've held the collar there and used it at the level that I use it on my dogs, and I can't feel it. I have to go twice the magnitude. I have to go, so I use it on a level 3 on my dogs, and I have to get to a level 5 or 6 before I start feeling it. And then one of the things that starts happening is, just like a TENS unit, it starts like contracting my muscles. So it's very different. It's not a shock electrocution that's going to lead to burns. I think a lot of people have this idea of a dog getting shocked and then being left with electrical burns, because that's what we've seen with people who get electrocuted. Very, very different kind of a stimulation. It's much more relaxed, and one of the reasons it works, and one of the reasons that on my skin I don't feel it as much as the dog does on his neck, is because, like my wrist, I've got a lot of nerves that are running through there. Well, a dog's neck is very musculature. It's got a lot of muscles in it. And when you set that TENS unit on there, and you start to, and even the slightest little stimulation causes that reaction, that muscle reaction, that the fire and relax. And so that little tiny, it doesn't take very much of a stimulation or even a vibration on their neck to get their attention. So misconception number 2 is the fact that it's shocking the dogs, and that the dogs are being electrocuted, like as if they had grabbed onto an electric fence, or if they had grabbed on, if they had a power pole fall down on their dog kennel. Totally different sensation, totally different experience. But unfortunately, it sticks with us because of how they've been used in the past, and because of the way they were designed in the past. The e-collars today, I don't even know if they would have the capacity to create a burn on a dog's neck. You're much more likely, instead of a burn, you're more likely, if you were to leave the collar on too long, to have the prongs wear through the dog's fur, and actually, and you'd have to leave it on there for quite a while, but eventually you could have it rub on there and create a sore from those prongs rubbing over time with no sensation at all. You're way more likely to hurt your dog by leaving the collar on their neck, even if it's off, or if the power's turned off. You're more likely to hurt your dog that way than by using the remote control and using it in training situations. So that's number 2. The stimulation does not hurt the dog, because the stimulation isn't what most people think it is. All right, so number 3, and the third misconception is perhaps maybe the one that frustrates me the most, because it's the one that people throw around. And I know that, listen, if you've listened to it this far, then you're probably not one of these individuals. But there's no question that I'm going to have 50 people who will jump on at the very beginning of this video. They'll listen to just the introduction, and they will fill the comments down below with all sorts of ranting and ravings about how e-collars are inhumane, they hurt the dogs, we should never use them. I've had this happen in multiple videos where I've talked about e-collars and how to use them and how I like to use them. And it doesn't really matter. There are some people who are just set in their ways that this is inhumane. I actually have a different opinion. I think that this is perhaps one of the most humane, training devices we have in the right hands and being used by someone who really understands how the collar is supposed to be used and how to use it in training situations. And here's the reason why I believe that. Because if I have my dog on a 6-foot leash, I've got 2 full-grown Labradors, and these dogs are wonderful. But if I want to let them out and let them go run all over the place, in the city where we just left, there was a leash ordinance. I couldn't have my dog off of my property without a leash on. And so, now just imagine trying to give a full Labrador the exercise that they need by me keeping them on a 6-foot leash. I can't run fast enough or long enough to give my dog exercise. Now, and think about this city ordinance. Or in context of with a Labrador. What's a Labrador's favorite game? And probably the best game for exercise. It's fetch. Well, with that city ordinance, in that city where I came from, you can't play fetch with a Labrador because they have to be on a leash. And I understand the reason for the Labrador. There's a lot of people that I understand the reason for the ordinance. I understand the reason for owning Labradors too, but I understand the reason for the ordinance. You've got people who are nervous around big dogs. They see them out in the park with no control. And there are people whose dogs have done terrible things. When you look at the numbers, though, of the number of dog attacks, they're pretty few and far between when it comes to requiring an ordinance on all of the entire city. I think my city had 3 dog attacks last year. In the kind of setting that we're talking about. Nevertheless, I kind of get sidetracked there. That's kind of a personal beef of mine. These leash laws, I think we've in an attempt to make everybody feel safe around dogs, we've really hampered people who own full-size dogs because, well, if they're not on a leash, how are they going to control them? Well, think about with an e-collar. I can take my dog out, and if we're at a park, say we're at a dog park, and there's lots of other dogs around, and I've got my dog over in one corner, and we're playing catch, and he's running, jumping, and doing all the things a dog does. And then he sees another dog that gets his attention, and he starts to head over to him. Well, if I've got my e-collar and I've trained him right, I can get his attention, and that e-collar stimulation, that vibrate, just like the girl in my class, who's going to be habituated to respond to that physical stimulation, that stimulation is going to get his attention. And once I get his attention on me, now I have him thinking instead of just reacting. I actually think it's more humane to use an e-collar in training, because number one, it opens up the door to a lot of different training opportunities and training situations that you simply can't do with a leash. And having those training opportunities ultimately lead to different life opportunities for your dogs. Better exercise, more fun, being able to actually be a dog and just run around. Dogs were not meant to be kept on leashes. And so all these people who get these little dogs and they walk them around on a leash, I guess you might have an argument that that's actually more inhumane, because that's not what they were designed to do. Especially Labradors, German Shepherds. Think about it: short hairs, pointers, any of the setter breeds, even some of the little dogs. Although the exercise is a little bit better because they have to work harder to keep up with your long legs, but even they were not designed or meant to be on a leash. And so I could argue that it's actually more inhumane to force your dog to stay on a leash all of the time, rather than giving him an opportunity to go out and run off leash with an e-collar. Now the benefit is I can give my dog that opportunity to go out and run off leash, and at the same time, I'm still in control. I can still call him back. If he's running around, say we're not even in the city, say we're up in the hills where I love to take my dogs, and we're running around and all of a sudden a porcupine waddles out of the brush. With that e-collar, I can keep him safe. Or what if we are at a park and we're playing catch, and he sees something across the street and he starts to bolt for that, for the street to go get whatever it is that has caught his attention, and there's a car coming. Well, if whatever's across the street is more enticing than the treats I've been using to teach him recall, when I try and call him back, he's not even going to pay attention to me. In fact, you run the risk of him not even being able to hear you. But with good, reliable e-collars, this is one of the reasons why I don't like to buy the no-name e-collars off of Amazon that have come from China. I love, and I've said this before, I really, really like, I've got my e-collar here plugged in, charging up. I really love Sport Dog e-collars. I think there's no company like them when it comes to customer service, and their products are awesome. And so you don't have to rely on their customer service often, but when you do, they always go above and beyond your expectations. So when you've got a really reliable e-collar and your dog starts to bolt across the street, I have a way to keep my dog safe in any variety of situations. And then not only that, but I also have a way to keep other people safe and other dogs safe as they're walking around. So again, to me, this last misconception, this myth that these e-collars are inhumane, is probably the most frustrating. It's the most unfounded. It's people they've got knee-jerk reactions to, essentially these are the people that would say your dog should never experience anything negative in their life. And it's not realistic. But then it also, if you play into the first misconception, the e-collar doesn't have to be negative. It should be a form of it should be a form of communicating like a text message. So there's my 3 biggest misconceptions, the ones that drive me crazy the most. Hope this has been helpful. If you've learned something, if this has been helpful or it's given you some piece at using an e-collar for your dog, go ahead and hit the like button and let me know that this was helpful for you. If you've got other questions about using an e-collar, leave me a comment down below, and I'll do some videos specifically addressing your questions. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in our next video.